Hey there, folks. Welcome to the CC Zone. I am Brankles. It's another season for the podcast, and I am joined this week with Orion and Flay. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, doing pretty good. Excited to be here.
All right. Well, folks that may not know, Orion, introduce yourself and who you are, and what's your role with League, and why are you so in love with this game?
Yeah, so my name's Orion. I'm going to be part of the color casting production crew for this split of CCS. Mostly on my spare time, I play support in my individual role, and I just like to talk about the game. So that's why I'm here.
Flay, you're the man. People know who you are. You're integral to this whole operation. What's it like seeing that? Hey, we're coming up on the lock-in tournament and also the next season for the CCS.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, obviously. From their first split from a test split on summer, seeing the growth from the spring, the applications massively increased this season. Obviously, we have double the amount of teams accepted. We almost reached 40 applications total. So seeing the excitement and kind of the overall, I guess, kind of joy that people are getting from the league, it's pretty exciting. Hopefully, this is kind of the first split of many big things that we have planned.
Well, let's get right to it because we have a lot of teams. There's so many teams that are now listed for the CCS, and we'll start with the Wednesday teams. Now, on my first list, we have Dorado Gaming Omega. And Orion, we'll start with you. Why should people be excited about this team? Is there a player that pops off to you?
So I have Dorado Gaming right now listed as my fourth best team of Wednesday's group. I think they can definitely be a team that should show a lot of prowess, especially in the lock-in tournament, being that they were a CCS team last split. I think they will definitely go pretty deep into the tournament. Obviously kind of depends on who they play in the lock-in, which they play Shadows. And I think they should probably be able to beat Shadows going into the round one. And then going up against PGO should be a little bit of a tougher challenge for them.
And Flay, you were in charge of putting all of these, some of these teams into a tier system, but I want to ask you, taking a look at the roster for them, we're seeing some players. What's it like when you see martial arts for Y, a player from last year coming back, and he's right now listed as a sub, but what's it mean to see players returning?
I mean, that's obviously great. One of our biggest goals in our organization is try to get at least 50% of the teams from last season back, which we were able to meet this season, as well as getting at least 70% of the playoff teams, and we were able to get 5 out of 6. So seeing Martial Arts March come back to the league as a sub, unfortunately his schedule doesn't work out. He was actually supposed to play for Oblivion Esports based on my knowledge, but it didn't work out for him, so he's going to be a sub. Still great to see him back, and honestly, I think the fact that Martial Arts is a sub, and from what I've heard from people in Dorado, the current top laner Pepe shows a lot of promise. If that's the case and they're comfortable with Pepe starting top lane, having Martial Arts as a backup, that kind of shows the quality we have. And I think as you saw last season, Brankles, top lane was probably the weakest role in the CCS in my opinion, so having a higher quality top laner is definitely important for the league.
And speaking of players and teams that have returned, we have the collective effort, and they are our reigning champions. They return pretty much every player. We do have like that substitute situation just because of moving pieces right now, but what's it mean to have a champion and majority of that roster back and to be able to be that top of the pedestal for people to aim for?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously having the collective effort back, and not just back, but the exact same 5 roster is huge. A lot of leagues struggle with bringing teams back. The fact that we got teams back, and specifically the exact same roster, as I said before, is amazing. And obviously, this team is extremely talented, right? They went 23-4 overall. They basically dominated the split. Their most competitive match was the grand finals, which we saw a pretty tight 4-game series. But really, it was, as the kids say, Philly B diff, our MVP last season. Unfortunately, based on what we know, it doesn't seem like Philly B will be able to participate in the Wednesday day of lock-in. Maybe the Thursday if it gets so far. So it's going to be really interesting, this collective. Yes, they're a first seed. Yes, they were defending champions, but they don't have their star player. So while they have an advantageous bracket at first, I could definitely see a team, and obviously when we get their bracket predictions, we'll go on this. I do have them losing to a team before semifinals. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if Flan and Cidermill, which is a very strong bot lane, what they can do as they use a substitute mid laner.
And Orion, you used to, you're constantly in this league scene. You've been a part of different leagues. You've seen it all. What's it like, for a player to see the champions have returned, and it's not just a complete clean sweep and we have new faces in, but there's someone to hit that pedestal and go after them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, any team wants to win it all, right? And especially when you have returning champions coming back, it just goes to show that, they're willing to run it back and they know that they can win it again because they've already won it before. So, I mean, they should come in with a lot of confidence, especially this lock-in tournament. I mean, apparently they don't have their main mid laner, so things could be a little different, especially because, my current rankings for the team is actually a little lower since they don't have their main guy in the mid lane. So excited to see what they could do without him. And, I'm sure most teams actually know that they don't actually have this guy going into their main squad. So people can see them as potential punch-out threat.
Now, we have, as we were looking at these Wednesday teams, it looks like it's stacked full of top-tier talent. Flay, when you guys were putting together this whole system, this whole schedule, what was it like whenever you saw, hey, we got the collective effort. you got teams like Limitless Exodia, but also Hard Hat Zone. And I've been hearing nothing but praises for this team, especially from other staff members, but also just hearing some trash talk that's been going on.
Yeah, Hard Hat Zone is my actual pick to win the lock-in. I think they're probably a top 3 team based on purely talent alone. They come in as a top 6 team in UGL, that's the Unified Junior League. To my understanding, that doesn't exist anymore. Unified shifted more community leagues, but when they had their Plat League, that was the highest prize pool Plat tournament. Finishing top 6 out of 32 shows a lot. But really what got from this team is kind of a talent they have. So they use their D4 import spot on Llama. I think it's really important to use your D4 import spot on either jungle or mid, and they have that. At the same time, if you look at this roster, it's filled with players who've hit Diamond before. They have a very talented player, Marshall, as well. So this is kind of a team when I'm looking at them, and I'm just kind of like, if you look at the roster, and you look at them on paper, and from what they experience, and I don't know how many of their members they had from the original Unified run, it seems that this could definitely be a team to kind of dethrone the top of standing in terms of collective. And in my opinion, I ranked them second in my seeding. Obviously, you can't rank them above the defending champions, but if what's true about Philly B, then they're probably the favorites to come in from Wednesday.
And Orion, I know that you are deep into the stats. What makes Hard Hat Zone a tough team to beat?
I think it's just exactly what Flay just said. They have a lot of just individual talent and prowess in their own individual lanes, to where they can just garner up a lot of these individual leads for themselves, to where they can just start slapping enemy teams with their wallets and their mechanics, to where it's just hard to play the game when you're already down 2 to 3k gold at 15 minutes when you're going for those early objectives. So a team like Hard Hat having the individual players and the individual skill to dominate their lanes should be a very good sign for them going into this lock-in tournament, where you probably don't have a whole lot of built-in synergy built in between your players, probably don't have a whole lot of set strategies built in. So individual talent and laning mechanics should be very much the name of the game in this lock-in tournament.
And moving on to our next team, we have RPG Huffquack. Flay, taking a look at this team, when you were putting together your tier system, I know, hey, we just have to put it together. What's something about RPG Huffquack that stood out to you guys when you were putting these together?
First, I'd like to mention, when I put the tier list together and kind of my 1 through 10 seeding, RPG did not make the roster change they just made today. So that could impact things. At least from what I've seen in the current roster changes, they actually look stronger now. Obviously, you can't change the brackets, already happened. So we'll see if this team can actually outplay their performance. But really the big thing about this is what I see is the fact that their jungler specifically showed incredible promise on this Heck Room. So I'm very curious as Joe Baby, their current captain, as well as their starting jungler, what he can do with this Heck Room and will he get respect banned? It's really all he's been playing in solo queue. I highly recommend taking it out. But obviously for RPG, they seem like a growing org. You've kind of noticed around the scene, Red Panda Gaming's kind of been moving on with new teams, and we're kind of able to see this roster because this is a different roster what they applied to. They still got Glacial, they still got Joe Baby, but we'll kind of see this 7-seed roster. And I think with a lot of the tier 3 teams, and even a bit of a tier 2, they're kind of question marks, right? Like, what is Zeal? What is RPG? What exactly is okay? We don't really know what these rosters can do because they're so young. They're not really more like developed or well-known organizations. So a lot of it's really shot in the darks. I wouldn't be surprised if one of these tier 3 teams shocks is not in the lock-in, but also in the season.
And Orion, when you see that a champ, especially with Joe Baby playing champs like Heckram, we're going to see probably a lot of all-ins from him. What's something that people need to look out for when it comes to a person that's willing to roll with that? And it's not just, hey, I'm going to play the Sejuani, but they're going to be all in.
Yeah, I think, having a lot of confidence is extremely important, especially for this type of tournament, because, this is your first time to show like what you actually have as a team and, make sure people can actually respect you. Going into this lock-in tournament where, this is the first time anyone ever gets to see any of your teams play. So especially with the lock-in not meaning as much in terms of the regular season, you can really just play with no fear, treat the games kind of more as like scrim matches, and just play super aggressively. For a player like him to already be known as a more aggressive player, this type of tournament style could fit very well for him.
Now moving to a team that I think will make some noise in the lock-in tournament just because I love underdogs. We have OK Infinite. Flay, I know that they're not viewed as the collective or the top teams, but what's it like also getting involved with these organizations that are young squads and they're wanting to be a part of this whole process?
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, a couple of these young squads you've kind of seen develop from the CCS. Goldfish Gaming seemed to be a relatively young squad when they applied, and now they've kind of have a very talented roster right now. We're kind of see how they're going to expand, maybe beyond the CCS, maybe not. So a lot of these young squads, yes, the CCS has gotten better, it's gotten more competitive, but we're still not at the tip top, right? We're still an up-and-coming league, and we have to develop a reputation. So giving these younger organizations a chance to play is important to see if they develop and actually stick through. Now, okay, they did play in Lotus, which was a preseason plat tournament. I think the only preseason plat tournament, if I'm aware. They didn't make the playoffs, but they showed some promise. They didn't actually were able to play with their starting lineup due to the day conflict, so we're going to have their starting lineup. But my big factor to watch here is their top laner and captain, Elsa from Frozen. This guy has kind of showed promise as a top laner. He's a pretty solid P4, P3 player. Look at the rest of the roster. You have a couple gold players. So really, when you're playing top laning, because as I said before, CCS top laners weren't exactly the strongest last split, it's going to really up to him to get leads early. And really in the CCS, with the kind of new addition of a 7th and 8th seed actually mattering, meaning you get guaranteed guaranteed spot in the qualifying tournament next split, with the amount of teams applying, it is actually pretty important to secure yourself at least a chance to make CCS last split. So I'm looking at Elsa from Frozen on the side of okay to kind of prove himself and maybe get some early leads so okay can get some surprises. And they have to be able to beat these lower teams like Zeo Blue and RPG.
And Orion, you know, with you being on teams and stuff, you know, what type of confidence do you say gives to a young group when they're given an opportunity to join a league? And it's not just, hey, we play together as a group of 5 and we're friends, but, you know, that you're part of something, you're part of a league.
Yeah, I think it means a lot. I mean, especially if these guys, if this is one of the first times ever actually being in part of a pretty competitive league, you know, this is their opportunity to show that they are able to compete. You know, I mean, right now we do have them listed towards as a bottom team. But that doesn't mean that they're going to stay a bottom team. I mean, these are just our predictions in terms of what we think they should be able to do. But just because we're predicting them to do poorly doesn't mean that they can show up and, you know, potentially beat these bottom half teams and then even compete with the top half teams, you know, because especially with this lock-in tournament being a best of 1 up until the finals, which could be a best of 3, you know, a coin flip can win a best of 1 in a lot of these situations. So if they come out swinging, then they could start surprising people.
And moving on to our next group, we have Limitless Exodia. You know, one name that I know that sticks out to me is Snow Life. I remember him playing in the CCS last year. You know, it looks like a lot of these guys, I haven't had a chance to delve deep into it, but I do hear a lot of word about the Limitless Exodia team being one of those top tier teams, that they have a chance to, you know, make a run and surprise some teams. And so for you, Orion, when you're not viewed as the top team and you're viewed as, let's say, tier 2, or you're viewed as, you know, maybe that 3rd or 4th seed in the tournament, does it make you have hey, we have a goal to set and go higher? Or does it also give them that opportunity to view that, hey, we have a chance to learn and grow?
Personally, I have Limitless Exodia closer to the top, actually, in my rankings. I think this team has a lot of potential in terms of their overall just individual ability. And I think if they can start putting things together, I think they can make a pretty deep run into not only the lock-in tournament, but being one of the top teams in the Wednesday rankings. So, you know, this is a type of tournament for them to actually show that, you know, hey, Flay was wrong putting them at a tier 2 team, and, you know, being able to prove themselves as they should have been a tier 1 team going into this lock-in tournament.
And Flay, we have a history here at the CCS where, you know, analysts, podcasters, we just get things wrong completely. Whenever you get a team that does actually fire back on, hey, we did better than what you predicted, what's it mean to see that competitive spirit just alive and well during this season?
I mean, look at this roster. I want to be clear, this is not a bad roster. It's just I think Wednesday is a very good conference. Yes, we have, and I like to correct you, Snow Goat coming back with a different roster. I think arguably maybe a better roster than last split. But in the end of the day, when I look at this team, it kind of looks like the team from last split. They're all pretty good, but no one can take over games. You know, yes, they have Kobe, who's pretty well known as a top player on the scene for AoE. Easy's a pretty well known mid laner as well. I've known him from his past in BOL. Yurik looks pretty strong, and I think actually that's the big thing. I think the AD carry of Limitless Hazard's Time is a much better improvement over Omnific with Snow Life, so we'll see how he can take that. But in the end of the day, until I actually see these guys play, it really just looks like another team from last play, which, you know, less Limitless made semifinals. Yes, they were a top 4 team, but when they made semifinals, they just kind of got destroyed by Lost Chapter. It was very, very clear who the better team was, and until they kind of prove it to me, not just Limitless in terms of players, but the organization. It seems that organization is a consistent playoff team who can never really make that finals run, And so until they prove me otherwise, I mean, this is going to be basically, I'm very confident they'll make playoffs in CCS. I will bet money on that. But I'm also very confident they won't make finals in CCS. That's kind of the way I view them.
Flay, I'm also looking at the Twitch chat, and someone is saying only Brankles gets things wrong. Now, that is our main man, Hiccup, who is he's also one of our co-hosts. Let us all remember that he had PGO winning it all, and he was vying for that shirt.
There's a reason that hoodie. Right
now. Yeah, there's a reason why he's not talking. He has been suspended indefinitely for his comments.
That's kind of yikes prediction.
I know, right? But going on to the next team, we have, let's see, Zeal Blue. Now, not a lot that I know about this team, because some of these teams are all new, and it's really cool to start to dive into it. For you, Orion, is there a player on Zeal Blue that sticks out to you, or is it just a combination of their team?
I think for this team, it's going to be definitely going to be a bit of a combination. I think probably their better player in this case is going to probably most likely be Banana Bread. I think he is the highest rated individual player right now on the team, and he looks to be one of the guys that's going to be like probably leading the squad in this case. I mean, I currently have this team rated a lot lower in the Wednesday area, so I think definitely they need to come out in this lock-in tournament, same as the other low-end teams, just kind of proving to not only themselves, but to, everyone else in the CCS that they actually can take some games off some of these teams. But, I think starting out in the lock-in tournament, they might have, hopefully they can get 1 or 2 wins. But after that, I feel like they definitely will start to struggle a little bit.
Flay, I was taking a look at, I actually pulled up the stats for Banana Bread, and, he's got some great games on, well, actually, he's played a lot of ARAM lately. But taking a look at, he's got some games where he's, but he's been playing some other games where he's got Zenzao, he's got the Lulu. For you, whenever you look at teams and they have that opportunity to, possibly roll swap and throw people off, does that excite you as someone that gets to watch these games play out?
100%. And I would like to mention Banana Bread. He's actually not a new player. He technically is our first CCS player to switch teams. He applied on the original Limitless roster, and then Limitless, I don't know what exactly happened, so I'm not going to speak for him, but AoE Kobe's ever new top laner, and Banana Bread was removed from the roster. Immediately picked up for Zeal Blue, so I gotta go some show. I mean, if Limitless picked them up, and again, I've kind of described Limitless maybe a little too negatively, they are a consistent playoff rosters. The players they pick up are usually quite decent. So I can kind of infer, if he was a Limitless starting top laner, he's probably a decent player. I don't know if his main is the top of a support and competitive. I know it sometimes changes. But what I do know is this Zeal roster and all of our project, because there is Zeal White and Zeal Blue, is a developmental roster. That's kind of where you see these like high goal players. And while, yes, the ELOs are low, from what I've heard of their org owner and their project, they have a lot of developmental staff and coaches. So look for Zeal to maybe start off rocky and then make a second half push. I don't think they're playing to win this split in terms of the championship. I think they're playing to maybe make playoffs, make a run, get better, and kind of take the roster they have onto the next split.
Well, Orion, going on to our next team, we got DNX. And I was pulling up their support, Xeranian, and he has a lot of Recon games. And I know people will say, oh, hey, is that a one-trick player? But whenever you are winning consistently on a champ, does that make it a situation where a team has to ban that out, and then now you have all these other champs that you can roll with?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a champion that you have to ban if someone's just winning consistently on, but a champion like Rakan that is just so versatile, and so you're able to go in, you're able to peel, you're able to have multiple ways of actually functioning as the champion. If he is continuously succeeding on that champion, it's definitely still worth potentially getting him off the comfort pick and going somewhere else. But since there are so many strong picks in the meta currently, Rakan's definitely not particularly close to the top of the list of the champions like Corki or Victor or Jinx or Caitlyn. Those champions are just so strong in the meta. If you have to use a ban on Rakan, then obviously those champions it just leaves up even more powerful picks for DNX, which could end up resulting in a really good situation for them.
And Flay, we're actually looking at the chat, and he's like, I got a 40% win rate on Rakan. When you see the trash talk, or you see the competitive banter that happens in the CCS compared to last year, what's it like seeing that it's starting to already pick up heading into this year?
That's actually a great question you asked. I don't think this was a CCS, but an overall amateur thing. We're very concerned, or at least I'm very concerned, how a lot of leagues don't really encourage banter or even just remove banter. I don't understand how a competitive event can't have banter. It's just part of every competitive event. If you watch sports, you know what I'm talking about. If you ever participated in a sport before, you know what I'm talking about. It just seems very discouraging that people seem to be afraid to communicate. Obviously, there's a line that you can cross, no question. But when people are afraid to actually, let's be honest, shit talk and actually have their rivalry, I mean, people care a lot more when they want to beat the person on the other side of the field because they think they're better than them, right? When there's like an ego at stake. Players here aren't playing to go pro. Sorry to break all your hearts. None of you are probably going to go pro. It's just the reality is. If one of you hits D2, maybe you have like a 0.1% chance. But none of you here probably going to go pro. So why are you playing? For the competitive spirit, for the ego, for the fact that you enjoy the game, for the fact that you want to experience a competitive environment around your elo base that gives you a feeling like the LCS, like the LCK, like the LEC. So when I see already banter happening, it makes me feel good that people are actually looking at their opponent, developing a sense of like, I want to show up here, not just because of the money, not just because of like, quote unquote, the team master, but also because of the pride, because I want to beat the other guy. So it's very encouraging. We try to encourage that and try to make it in a healthy way. It's kind of what we do with our content, our tweets, and our overall general demeanor. We want people to feel like they'd be able to shit talk and have like a prideful sense in their gameplay.
And I remember with last year, during our podcast where we had interviews, we had Philly Birto, had some great moments where he trash talked the other teams. We had not Golden Glue, Gregorio. He had some great statements. But I'll also never forget Martial Arts for Why. I believe he was the one that talked about his big forehead. So, it's just great to see that there is that sense that people are going to be talking about the upcoming games, wanting to beat other people. I even saw it in the chat earlier today. You had to remind people, hey, there is a trash talk chat that you can use because people want to do it. And I'm so happy that there is an opportunity for them to be able to use it. Now, moving on to the next team, we have TA Light. For you, Orion, where do you have them in your rankings? But also, is there a player that people need to look out for? Because I know that they have a lot of players on their roster.
Yeah, so right now I have TA Light right in the middle of the pack. I think I have them listed at 5 out of 9. 1 sec, I gotta find them. Yeah, so I think TA Light is a team that right now is right in the middle of the pack. They potentially have a lot of different options in terms of like who's going to actually start for them or sub for them because they have a 10-man roster. So excited to see who's actually going to be participating in the lock-in since they have just so many people on their roster. One name that does speak out to me in terms of like a name that I recognize is Dr. Phil and Chill and Dallas are the 2 players that I actually recognize the most on this roster.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to the Thursday roster now. And Play, we're going to start with a team that obviously was part of the organization last year, and we have Goldfish Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of seen this transformation from them. They started off as a Magikarp, and now they're a Gyarados, apparently. People are picking them to make a run. And I see that one of their subs is Gregorio, who was a great player last year. So when you see a team that's coming in and building talent around that, but also, a great player is one of our subs, what's it mean to see that a top tier team is coming into this league?
Yeah, I mean, credit to Goldfish. I think the Gregorio signing was probably the biggest signing of the offseason, quote unquote. From all the free agents, he was really one that actually moved in. Rumor has it he may also play tomorrow jungle. We will see. I'm excited to see at least a game of him jungle. They're figuring out some roster stuff, but when you got someone like Gregorio as your substitute, obviously he's a very talented player, so it's a very young player. So, the maturity factor may come in and also kind of like the overall seriousness of the player. But if it can get him to focus and be competitive and play like he did on last chapter, I mean, he probably, in terms of talent, was the best player last year on the league, if we're being honest, at least the way he played. It's more so that it seemed that from a quote-unquote MVP perspective, Philly B was more valuable to his team than he was. And he had a very talented team. I mean, that lost chapter team was probably the best team on paper, per se. So it will be interesting. I think he hopefully, and in my opinion, kind of deserves to get that jungling spot and start him. If he gets that spot, I mean, I had him ranked pretty high. I think I had him ranked third off the top of my head. This is a team I could definitely see make a run and just not just like the lock-in run. I'm talking like the playoffs run. I could see that happening. I could also see him just completely implode and miss playoffs. They had a reputation last split of being a coin flippy team. They lost a lot of 1-2s last split. And even though they had a 10-13 game record, which is superior to 7th and 6th place, they were 8th because they just couldn't close that series. If they can fix the coin flipping habit, and I mean, 3 of our starting players, I believe, are still active on the team. So if they can fix the coin flipping habit, which could carry over because it's still same solid foundation, they've just kind of changed pieces around. I could see this team be really, really good or be the biggest disappointment of the year.
And Orion, from an analyst perspective, when you see a team that is able to employ a sub of that caliber, with like as we were saying with Gregorio, what type of mentality goes into a game where you have to now possibly have to game plan for that? It's not just some random person they grabbed off the street, but it's a top tier player.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big deal, especially for drafting, because, I mean, you never really know if it's going to be, Light Genesis playing or Gregorio playing. So, I mean, obviously, when you get into the Champion Select, or not necessarily Champion Select, but when you get into the client, they have to line up in LCS order. So you do have an idea of who is actually playing in the match. But, depending on if their play style is different, you might have to adjust based on, like, if the champions play differently, or if the team plays differently with both players, different champion styles. So, it's pretty exciting to see, especially if they have this kind of talent on the sub roster. It just goes to show how much faith they have in their actual jungler if he is able to continue like playing well. So
now we move on to Hiccup's favorite team.
Jesus Christ.
Predictive Gaming Odin. Flay, this team is back. And we've got our biggest trash talker in the league in Hubzone back as well. What's it mean to have, potentially the heel, if you say, of the CCS world?
Obviously, I'm excited to have them back, all jokes aside. They're very important. They are our community. They're a competitive team. They're very strong. I would like to highlight they made some roster changes, not by choice. They actually brought back the exact 5-man roster, which I did speak a little ill to in my season preview of it. I did say I recommend doing a slight roster change. If you're trying to win the championship, and the way they got beat by Collective, I was like, you have to make a roster change. They stuck to it, but by really of no choice of their own, PG Wake is not starting due to conflict time, so they actually are moving Swagner back from support to AD carry. We'll see how that goes. I've heard mixed results from either direction. So Swagner, I think, was a very, very good support last year, so seeing him switch from AD carry kind of makes me see what's going to happen. I mean, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. And they brought in Surprise as a new starting support, but the top side, Puff Zone, Charizard, and Matt are back. There's a very strong top side. Probably one of the best top sides in the league last year. Yes, they had a bit of inconsistency, but in terms of like what they wanted, really the inconsistency was Puff Zone, to be exact. I thought Charizard and Matt were both a pretty solid duo. But I had them ranked as first, and it was very, I guess the word put it, reluctant to put it first. It was more so not that I thought they were a definite first seed, but more so everyone else between Horizon and Goldfish mainly had questions. On paper, Horizon and Goldfish, in my opinion, are better. But I have not really seen Horizon play, and I've not seen Goldfish play at all. And when it comes to best of 1 tourneys, I almost want to go for default from experience. But this is a wishy-washy first seed is what I would call them. So,
well, going off the point of, hey, you were saying maybe they need to look for a roster change, but Orion, you could probably speak to this. How important is it, though, for an organization to, let's say, run it back and they say, hey, we can learn from our mistakes and run forward with it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, roster changes, they're not always guaranteed to get an upgrade when you change your position. But a lot of times, having faith in your current players you already have can be more important, if not like just as important as making roster changes. Because, as a player, when you have like your coaches and your teammates and your org just backing you saying, hey, we believe in you guys and you guys are our main 5 and we're going to ride with you, like ride or die, basically. A lot of times that makes you as a player just feel really good about yourself. But hey, these guys believe in me. I believe in myself, and we're gonna show these guys what we're actually made of. If you're making roster changes every other week or every other split, it's like, oh, like when am I going to get replaced? Since sometimes you can just be very, just reluctant on like whether or not you want to actually stay with the team. But if your team starts building faith around each other, then a lot of times that can be ultimately better and build really good synergy.
And going off of talking about the Wednesday thing, we had Zeal Blue. Now looking at the Thursday roster, we have Zeal White. For Flay, when you were putting these together and you saw that you have 2 teams from from the organization standpoint, which of these 2 would you say is the better team? And ultimately, what do you like about Zeal White?
I do think it is Zeal White between the 2. I think Zeal White starts at a higher level. Again, it was stressed about development. We here at CCS strongly believe in development. We think developing players is important. I mean, at the end of the day, NA Amateur is effectively NA's development system, whether we like to admit it or not. It is what it is. It's not the most accomplished or best development system, but it's gotten a lot better from 4 years ago, but it was, in my opinion. So that's great. And when I looked at Zeal White, they have started high elo. I think my big thing is Hydron. He looks like a player who could potentially take off for them. But really, from the Zeal roster, what kind of intrigued them as an organization is the fact that they are so highly focused on developing these rosters and kind of having this coaching staff to get them better. And if that is the case, yes, they start lower, but I'm excited to see what they can actually do, because I particularly think when I look at Wednesday and Thursday, the big difference is this. Wednesday, I think there's a clear gap between like the top 6 or 7 and the bottom 3. But when I look at Thursday, besides like Horizon, Goldfish, and PGO, everyone else, anything could happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if a Zeal White team shocks us. And I'm really curious to see how much of it the quote-unquote development actually goes along.
And one thing I've noticed so far, Ryan, especially with these Thursday teams, is that a lot of the team captains are from the support position. And Soar Emperor is the team captain for Zeal White. Is there anything about his game that stands out on why he's the captain? Or is there something that, is it just normally a support position?
Not really sure, based on like this team alone, because I don't know a whole lot about Zeal White, but I know like in terms of a in-game leadership role, I mean, your top and your mid and your ADC are more focused on like their individual lane, not trying to mess up a whole lot, and a lot of the early like communication and just like the sharing of knowledge is typically done through the jungle and the support role. So, for this team, they could see that Sora Emperor just has like a really good game knowledge, and like he's just kind of being basically the conductor, making sure like his ADC and his 2 solo lanes are able to just effectively play the game and not have to worry about thinking as much like outside of the box, and that could probably just be more like his job being the conductor.
And Orion, sticking with you, we're going to talk about Crosspoint Origin. And when you take a look, we have one of the owners of the CCS teams. He's also going to be playing, and he's playing the support role. In your time, is this like a normal thing, or do you think this is kind of more on the rise? What do you see from your perspective?
Typically, I haven't seen a whole lot of owners play like within their own org, because people can see it as like he's like putting himself forward instead of like potentially other players. Like he's like saying that he's better because he's the quote-unquote owner. I mean, to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about Crosspoint Origin, but typically, like, owners tend to stay away from playing. They do more of just, like, the management side, unless they're just, like, trying to do it more, like, for fun stuff. But in this case, I actually don't have a whole lot of knowledge on this team.
Well, let me pull up real quick for you, Orion, because I'm taking a look at his recent team, his recent champs.
Mm-hmm.
We do have, let's see. We have games like, it looks like he likes to play a lot of tanks during ranked games. So whenever you see someone's willing to play that tank role and not have to worry about, I need to be the constant damage. What's it mean to see that, hey, this guy's actually willing to play the tank role?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely looking to, definitely be the facilitator for the team. He is the support position. So, there's not a whole lot of supports in the game right now that can just do a whole bunch of damage anyways. But, for him being, he's the captain of the team, being the main engager of the team, if he's playing all these supports, he basically, a similar situation to Solar Emperor, just being the conductor of the train, trying to make sure everyone gets across the finish line safely and sound. Could be a really good sign for this team. And
going to you, Flay, kind of peeling back that curtain, for behind the scenes, what was it like working, let's say Crosspoint Origin? This is a new team into the organization. For those that are tuning in, what was it like working with them to get them to be a part of the CCS?
So Crosspoint's actually a pretty, I guess, OG quote-unquote amateur org, but not in the sense that I guess most people would expect. Their owners, Arrow and also Gus, who were original, if I recall, Compete League admins from a very old amateur league, like 6 or 7 years ago. They basically stick together, and their quote-unquote org is usually just their team that they play with. They've kept more or less the same 5 players for like 4 years or 3 years. So this is a group that just kind of sticks together. I know they have switched their AD carry, if I recall. So this is a new AD carry entering them, but this is a team that's basically stick together, and they kind of go around leagues and leagues, and they're consistent performers. And consistent as in their teams are going to be solid middle of the pack teams usually, probably make playoffs. Afterwards, it depends on the quality of league probably, but this is a team that you can expect experience is their favor. Look for Crosspoint, in my opinion. Yes, I have him ranked pretty low in my lock-in, because I do the lock-in in terms of, I guess, talent, but they have him ranked as 9th seed. But in terms of early CCS start, the first schedule has not come out yet, But if they get a favorable early start, I think based on this experience alone, I could see this team start like 2-0 or 2-1 for really no reason besides the fact they've played together. So if they're going to make the playoffs and sneak in, it's going to be a good early start. As the newer teams get together, Crosswind should have an advantage of actually being able to play each other for a while.
Now, moving on to you, Orion, we're going to be talking about Sensei Squad. And I've been looking at all these names, and I don't even know what type of player he is, what he does on the Rift, but I'm in love with this name of Aquatic Bear.
Yeah, actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, when I was doing my research earlier on a lot of these players, I was like, oh wow, Aquatic Bear, look at that. That's a pretty interesting little name. He is the captain of the team, so excited to see what he's able to do this season. Yeah,
and I was taking it also. My question for you is, what would you say is the best name you've come across besides your own? Obviously, what's the best name you've come across in League?
Honestly, this is just kind of put me on the spot on this one.
It's okay to say Brankles. It really is okay to say Brankles, but
to be honest, this isn't actually anything like I know like he's kind of like my boss and everything, but like Hiccup is actually a pretty cool like league name because like you don't actually think of Hiccup in terms of like when you're like playing League of Legends, it's just like a noise, it's a hiccup, right? So it's I think it's actually pretty cool. I've never met a person in League of Legends named Hiccup before. So I'll do Hiccup.
Oh man, if only you knew him in person. Going to you, Flay. Aquatic Bear. I was taking a look at his stats. He's level 385. He looks like he likes to play a lot of all-ins. Mm-hmm. When you get to watch a player, use champs that just goes all in and create these moments, what's it like for you guys as an organization management team to sit back and say, "Wow, we made the right choice in letting this team in"?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I look at Sensei Squad, they were actually originally Elysium, and then something happened with the organization. So this is not a 5-man friends team. Yes, they've kind of brought back kind of a curtain, but they're like, they're back again as like, a kind of like revamped of the old Elysium roster led by Aquatic Bear. But this is a pretty decent team on paper. Rumor has it, I don't actually know the player, but one of the players in the actual team is extremely talented. I don't remember which one. I just remember hearing this is something that was talked about for Sensei Squad. They have someone there who should be someone to watch, an all CCS level player. At the same time, when I look at Sensei Squad as an overall team and ELO unit, I really don't know what to make of this team. I have them 6th place. I could have argued 4 for them. I could have argued maybe even 7 for them. They put him 6th. I felt like it was a safe kind of purpose. But if you actually look at who they play in the first round, if I recall, they played DNX, which is another very talented team. Depending on the result in that game, will show us a lot about Sensei Squad. I wouldn't be surprised if this team is a lot better than I have them placed. To be honest with you, don't know a lot about their players. Don't really know a lot about the actual unit itself. But from what I've heard and what I've seen on paper, they're an interesting team to watch out.
And going on to a team that you guys, I've heard, especially when we're talking about in the lobby getting ready for the podcast, is that Horizon Gaming. And especially I've been hearing things about Kaiser Uwu. Orion, is there what exactly is about this guy that have you guys buzzing to talk about?
Yeah, so Horizon Gaming is actually my pick to win lock-in. I think this team is probably in terms of like my overall opinion, the highest individual talent going into just a brand new tournament, which is pretty exciting to see. In terms of a player like Kaiser Uwu, can't believe I just said that. He definitely has a lot of players around him that are very strong and talented, especially his jungle position. I feel like him and Kral Sultan will probably be able to lead the way in terms of mid-jungle duo going into the lock-in tournament. So I'm really excited to see how Horizon does. Hopefully they, do me right in terms of winning the entire thing, but that's all I got.
And Flay, where do you have Horizon Gaming on your tier list? But also hearing Kral Sultan in the chat saying he is cracked, talking about Kaiser Uwu, talking about that support that he has for his teammate.
Well, I think Sultan better hope he's cracked so he can actually get carried this split. But besides having Sultan back into CCS, which we are excited for, obviously, this is the only roster that has 2 active D4s. And when I mean active, I mean as in they had a D4 import last split. I think Sultan actually already peaked D4. So in terms of pure talent, like if you're just going pure solo queue talent, this is probably the best team in the league. Maybe except for Hard Hat, this is probably the highest ELO-esque team in the league. I've heard very good things of his Horizon things. From what I've heard from their scrims, kind of like on the kind of general senses, they're doing quite well in that category. They seem extremely talented. Sultan last split wasn't really play a lot of jungle. The fact that I think the roster around them is a lot stronger, and from what I've seen, their mid laner, this could potentially be a team that I think of all the teams in the Thursday League is probably the most talented purely on paper. So, really for Horizon, I have not seen them play, but from what I've heard and from what I know, which is Sultan teams tend to be pretty competitive in general. The roster as around is pretty good. It's a very high elo roster. They already have basically 2 diamond players, if we're being honest. And if the scrim results are true, that they really are playing that well, Horizon Gaming has a chance to really just basically almost be like the collective of last and just kind of dominate the league. But we have to watch them play, and I'm very excited. They are the 2nd seed, if I recall. They have a pretty fairly easy path to the finals. I mean, they played Grinchy, who's already won by FF. We'll talk more about predictions afterwards, but I think they have a pretty reasonable path to actually make it to semis and most likely finals.
And just a quick point, I also do like the fact that it looks like Scomps and Bravo for Horizon Gaming, it looks like they have that chemistry and history with each other. So that'll be really interesting to watch throughout the season, especially during the lock-in tournament. But moving on to a team that I think is a team that could also make some upsets in the tournament is Shadows. And despite the name Shaco's Thick and Dumpy, I'm taking a look at this team. When Orion, when you look at underdogs, so to speak, with like Shadows, when they're going to be facing some teams, what mentality do you go into? Let's say a lock-in tournament, and you're viewed as an underdog. Do you have experience in that, and what advice do you give to teams that are in that similar position?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, when you aren't as a highly, let's say highly as a rated team in terms of, maybe Horizon or Predictive Gaming or Goldfish Gaming, these teams are just like going into this tournament basically expected to make semifinals. You kind of just go into the tournament with nothing to lose, really. I mean, if you end up, potentially bowing out first couple of rounds, it's not a huge deal in terms of going into the season. But if you go out and you start winning a lot of games, all of a sudden, you're a team to mess with. You're not just going to be a team that people, when they go into planning, will forget about. Like they're going to be a team that actually people will start worrying about a little bit. And and if you end up losing, it's like, oh, it's not a big deal. But if we end up winning, then it's like it's even better. So ultimately, it can just be a win-win situation for these guys, I think, if they start doing well in the lock-in tournament.
And to Flay, where does this team rank in your tier system? Do you have them kind of a middle of the pack, or do you view this is a team that can make some noise?
The best way I would describe this team, it looks like budget collective. It looks like the Walmart brand version of collective. What I mean by that is that Jenko, their mid laner, he looks pretty cracked. From what I've heard, from what I've seen, and from also his actual elo, I think a very strong player. Now, I think Shadows, correctly, something I kind of surprised most teams didn't do it, use their D4 import spot on their mid laner. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Why wouldn't you give the one player that can actually be Diamond, who in theory should be better than the average plat player, give him a mid lane. Let him dominate the lane. If you can consistently win mid lane, game becomes so much easier. If you always lose mid lane, you always feel like your map's collapsing. You allow your jungle to do more. So really, when I look at the Shadows team, I have him ranked, I believe, 5th off the top of my head. Which really comes down to Jenka. I think Jenka, I'm pretty confident to say, will probably be an all CCS player. From what I've seen, from what I've heard, and what I've looked at, he looks like a very, very good mid laner. But if Jenka could be an MVP candidate, he can just straight up carry this team to a deep playoff run. It really comes down to the rest of the roster. The young Nats team is pretty well known. And I like to mention, this is, even though they're not officially claimed, a RAR team. All jokes aside, RAR usually fields pretty competitive teams. And the organization itself has won, to quote themselves, a lot of chips. But we can joke about that all we want. It is true. They've won quite a bit. Not as much in higher elo, but at the end of the day, I could see Jenka just kind of carry. So I would actually keep an eye on Shadows. I'm pretty optimistic that Jenka, especially when we're looking at the other mid laners, will be able to gap most of these guys.
And sticking with you, Flay, we're going to talk about Iconic Severance, and they have a champ or a player that I think he played the CCS last year with Sex Goddess.
Mm-hmm.
But we also, we're starting to see, hey, let's build around him. We also have Hunter Wolf Steel and Yowie. What's something that sticks out to you when it comes to Iconic?
So Iconic's story was my favorite. They were actually my favorite team last split, personally. I was very happy what they pulled off. They were, no disrespect, a very bad team in the first half of the split. They were not good. Second half, they went 3-1. I think they were one, I want to say they were like 1-4 in the second half, like 9 for 10th place. And they made this miracle run that they basically had to almost win out every game and get lucky. And they were like 3-1. They got lucky. They won a half a game tiebreaker over someone to make playoffs. And then they played PGO in a super competitive quarterfinals. Everyone had that like as like an easy 3-0. They should have taken that series in 5. They actually kind of trolled the game. They almost took PGO to 5 games. They turned the entire season around. They come back with the exact same roster. I was a little concerned because I was like, yes, this roster did make that miracle run, but on paper, it's not very good if we're being honest. But they replaced their jungler. Don't know the reason, but this jungler looks a lot better. And then Sex Goddess, as you mentioned, he was the only I think, Limitless, Lost Chapter, PGO collective player to be an all CCS player. I actually was very, very happy for him. I pushed him very heavy because I thought he was a really good AD carry. And I was like, this guy's kind of caring a lot about this team. He's come back, and as you said, build around him. He's a talented player. And AD carry is a team-oriented role. If you have a bad team around an AD carry, it's kind of hard for him to do much. But if you build a decent team around this AD carry, I'd be surprised for Iconic. I think they're a team that definitely could surprise us. I'm kind of happy with the change they made on the jungle.
And going to you, Ryan, the same thing. When you see, when you hear all these things and the story that goes into it, but for you, you're an analyst and you look at stats. Is there anything that stands out to you when it comes to Iconic?
I think just the ability to persevere throughout your season. I think, going down so early being touted as, somewhat a team that just isn't as a high level as some of those other teams. I think, being able to go 3-1 in the back half, have a decent playoff run and even end up making upgrades towards, or quote unquote upgrade. We don't actually know if Hunter will be a better jungler for this squad. But ultimately it does look like an upgrade on paper. So hopefully this team will be able to keep that momentum going with them, going from the 3-1 and into a decent playoff run, and then going into lock-in. Hopefully they'll be able to do a lot better starting out wise. And
sticking with you, Orion, we're going to talk about a team that I'm very intrigued with, is Team Death Realm. And I was taking a look at some of their stats and actually pulled it up real quick. Bipolar, for example. 21 kills in a game on Rek'Sai. And yes, it ended in a defeat, but that's 21 kills. And I was also looking at Matt, plays the Kassadin. When you face a team that is willing to just go all in, and it doesn't matter that, hey, we may make mistakes, but they go for these engages and these do or die situations, how scary is that mentality if you're a team that's, let's say more passive?
Yeah, I mean, it's really scary, especially for, a champion, like if you're going up against the Rek'Sai, like a champion that needs all those kills in order to be successful, because she eventually just falls off a cliff the later on the game goes. But if Rek'Sai gets going early, she can very easily steamroll a game, which is probably one of the reasons why he ended up getting so many kills in that game.
And I see in the chat, Mr. Protate is saying he's the better player. And I'm taking a look. 2-6-12 on Sejuani. I don't know if that's better than the 21 kill of Rek'Sai, but a win is a win in the end. But going to you, Flay, what's something about Team Death Realm that stood out to you guys when you added them to the league?
My first two players I noticed was Matt and Nemesis. This roster's kind of been slept on, I feel like. I saw them also in Aegis. I don't think the exact same roster, but the organization. Organization apparently has been around them. They were an Upsurge and Unified team. Again, that was the highest highest prize pool plat tournament, regardless of Unified itself, in terms of a league, but that usually leads to more competitive teams. So I can infer that was a pretty competitive league. They finished second in Style Esports. I believe that is a point league though, so bit ishy-washy in terms of quality. But when I look at this Death Realm team, I have him ranked as 4th. I actually also will go to his predictions, have him beating Collective. So I'm probably higher than the average person. I'm pretty excited to see what Matt G can do, actually. I think he is on top of my head, their D4 import player. I'm always excited what this D4 import players can do, specifically because you only get one, right? You only get one player that was D4 last split, or that his D4 this split that you added, right? Obviously, once you join, you can climb, but it's very interesting what these teams use, these D4 players, where they use them. And I'm kind of looking for his team Death Realm. I haven't watched him yet, but from what I've seen and heard, looks to be a pretty good team.
And now we come to our last team, which actually is a team that, out of all of them, I would get a logo on my shirt. I would actually,
you would say,
Grinchy Goons. Now, all jokes aside, I love their logo, but I also love that this is a team, and I had made my predictions, and I thought Grinchy was going to pull off an upset in the tournament, and you guys were like, "Oh, that's crazy! What are you thinking?" But it's fun, at the end of the day, these teams get to play a game that they love, or a game that they feel like that's super competitive and a joy to play with each other. And Orion, I know that they're not highly rated, so to speak, but what's it mean to just know that, hey, this is a team that gets to go out there and compete and maybe prove some points to the top teams?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, competing is always fun, no matter if you're going into a prediction rating, like if you're the number 1 or the number 10 team. Obviously, you know, when you're predicted to do a lot better than some of the bottom half teams, obviously it's like you have expectations to fulfill. I mean, this team doesn't really have much expectations going into the lock-in tournament, so it's just kind of, you just get to go out there, get to play some League of Legends, and then all of a sudden, you know, you really get to do, you know, what you want to do just for fun. You don't have to worry about competing at a high level, or competing to just basically win out the lock-in, right? You're not expected to win the lock-in. So if they come out and they show that they're able to win the lock-in tournament, or just do really well in the lock-in tournament, then all of a sudden predictions are going to start changing rather quickly.
And Flay, we'll come to you the final question about the teams. When you guys sit back, you and Silver and Densoft and all of them, when you sit back and look, what's it mean for you to know that you guys have put together a 20-team league, and you get to say that you're part of this, and it's not just, hey, we randomly put these people together, but that this is all something that you guys worked hard on?
We're very happy. This split we had choice. Last split we trying to get 10 teams. This split we were trying to cut down to 20 teams. So that's a big kind of relief. I mean, it's a different type of stress, right? It's different stress, and you're like, are we even gonna have the teams that run the split? And compared to this split, it's like, are we even gonna get the teams we need to run the split and being selective? I want to highlight something about these bottom teams. Yes, you don't have a lot to play for, but because of the kind of demand and kind of interest we've gotten, we are planning on doing a qualifying tournament next split. So if you're Grinchy Goons, yes, you're kind of like, I like to call you the Thursday, yeah, okay. And the fact that, you're a group of gold plat players, not really a lot expected from you. But the fact is, this organization, this kind of team per se, has something to play for, right? Getting 8th place gives them the chance next split to become the CCS again and prove themselves. Even better, if they finish 6th place, they're guaranteed in CCS. I'm sure when many of you saw the iconic roster, you're like, this roster doesn't look that great on paper. Well, they finished 6th last split. They proved to us that they were better than the other 4 teams below them. If you finish top 6, you earn the right to come back next split. So you're not everyone's playing for a championship. Some people are playing for development. We've seen that with Iconic. They got 6th place. They guaranteed their spot. They're making changes in the better direction. Maybe Grinchy Goons and EOK can do that as well.
And you can't count out goal players. We also saw a goal player that pulled off a victory over PGO. And if I'm not mistaken, also put the guide on how to play Shin or something like that into the chat. But
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes,
it's going to be a lot of fun watching these teams play out. And we don't have a lot of time left, so I want to get your guys' thoughts on the bracket itself, the lock-in tournament. Orion, we'll start with you. Who is your final 4 teams, and what played into those decisions?
Yeah, so one second, I gotta find it actually. Scroll up a little bit. Yeah, so my bracket in the final 4, I have the top side of the bracket is PGO and Limitless, and then for the bottom half of the bracket, I have Horizon and Death Realm. Actually, same with Flay. I do think Death Realm can be a pretty surprising team going into this lock-in tournament, and with Collective not having their main mid laner, I think there's a potential for an upset there. I think Horizon's path to top 4 definitely makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, they're not necessarily playing against like super great teams, and I think they're the number 1 team going into their side of the league as well. And then for PGO and Limitless, I think personally, I think the top side of the bracket is very coin flippy. I think it is actually a lot harder competition going because you have Goldfish, Limitless, Dorado, PGO. There's a lot of really talented teams that top side of the bracket, so really any team can win up there. But I did end up going with PGO and Limitless for the top side of the bracket.
And Flay, for you, who you got in your top 4, and who's your champion?
Sure. So I'll do a path for each of them. PGO is my first one. I got him playing and beating Crosspoint in the quarterfinal, not quarterfinal, round of 16. I think the talent will be too much for Crosspoint, even though they have the experience. I have them beating Dorado. I think Dorado is paper, from what I've heard, it's more of a developmental roster. We're trying to improve. Now, I want to highlight Dorado is very, very well known in the scene for individually picking their players and picking high quality players. They've shown with the amount of championships they have. So do not underestimate this Dorado team. But when it comes to best of one single elimination tourneys, I will always default to experience. Because listen, it's a best of one, right? Who's gonna make the least mistakes is probably gonna win. PGO is, no offense, kind of a coin flippy team. I trust them not to make the losing play more than these other teams. Then I think they're gonna face off against Hard Hat. Hard Hat's actually my champion as well. I think they have a pretty easy opponent, either in Zeal White or Yeok. I'm very confident. Then they face either a really talented Goldfish or Limitless team, which is honestly that quarterfinals match is stupid stacked between Goldfish and Hard Hat. But I think the talented Hard Hat will be too much for either Goldfish or Limitless. I have them facing off against PGO. In the bottom half, got Horizon and Death Realm. Horizon, I think, is a pretty consistent path to the finals. The Grinchy game in the FF, I think of all the teams, Grinchy may be the 20th seed if I had to rank the teams between 1 to 20. So I think Horizon should have a pretty convincing win in the round of 16. It will be a major upset if they lose. When they face off against DNX or Sensei Squad, both kind of unknowns, but again, the talent of Horizon is just too great. And finally, in the bot side of the bracket, the Death Realm TA match is kind of coin flippy, but when I look at this TA roster, nothing really stands out. And I'm very excited for his Death Realm roster. I'm on the hype train. And then in the bottom, they're going to play against Collective, in my opinion, in the quarterfinals, but Collective will not have Philly B from what we know. Not having the MVP in the league, I don't care what anyone says, your team's just not going to be as good, right? You can't remove the literal MVP of the league and be better. I'm excited to see Flan and Cinnamon what they can do, though. That bot side for Collective is quite talented. Maybe they can carry, but if they had Philly B, I'd pick Collective, obviously, but no Philly B means Death Ram for me. And then it's the semifinals between Death Ram and Horizon.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you all my prediction real quick.
Oh, God.
All right. So I have RPG losing to PGO. I got PGO winning that one. But I have Shadows beating PGO to make the Final Four. I have Goldfish winning in the Elite 8 against Yeok. So that means I got Yeok beating Hard Hat Zone and Zeal White. I also have DNX beating Grinchy in the Elite 8 to make it to the Final Four. So yes, I have Grinchy beating Horizon. I also have DNX facing off against Collective in the Final Four. Now, my championship game is going to be Goldfish versus Collective, and I have Collective winning. Because, as we all know, as you know, Flay was pointing out, oh, well, you take out the MVP, how are they going to be so good? But what if they do? What if they make it this far and then Billy B comes in? What do you do then? So I think the Collective are going to go all the way and win it all.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so, yeah, you know, and yeah, people in the chat are saying Brankle knows it. There we go. I know what I'm talking about.
I will say, if they can make semifinals, I definitely think Collective win. If Philly B is playing on Thursday, I think they win. If they can make it. We'll see how hard Flank can carry, though.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. We're coming up to the end of the show, but you know, Ryan, is there any final statements you want to have about this upcoming lock-in tournament?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm just really excited to see, you know, what these teams can do. I mean, obviously, our predictions at the end of the day really don't mean anything. Obviously, it's more or less just for us to get an opportunity to be here to talk and just to give like some like small insight here and there. But in reality, we don't really know a whole bunch about any of these teams because we're going into, like, we've had multiple patches hit recently. Players have had more time to play and get better at the game. So overall, I'm just really excited to see who comes up and who is able to perform in these next couple of days.
And same question to you, Flay.
Yeah, and I mean, look at these teams. You're right. We really have no idea what's going to happen. We don't exactly know who will be able to win. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I'm excited to see what's going to happen overall. And really, I want to stress this. Whoever wins the lock-in tourney, that doesn't really mean anything. It's a best-of-one single elimination, right? Like, anything could happen. Yeok could win. I'm not going to change my prediction for the tournament for Yeok winning, right? You know, Collective could win. That doesn't change my prediction. Fundamentally, it's a best-of-one tourney. It's like March Madness. Yes, one seeds usually go far, but one seeds don't always win in March Madness for a reason. That's part of the madness. In this lock-in, we're going to see the same. Don't be surprised if upsets happen. It's a best-of-one. Anything can really happen. And if you lose, you're out. So who knows you're going to lose in the first round.
Well, that's all the time we have. Guys, thank you so much. You know, I'm Brankles, joined by Orion and Flay. Guys, thank you so much. And all of those in the chat, thank you for tuning in, you know, sending in your statements and the trash talk and the banter. I love it, guys. And we look forward to the lock-in tournament. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on the CC Zone.